Welcome to Curb Cuts and Conversations, the podcast where we explore accessibility, urbanism, transportation, and how cities can be made better for everyone. I'm your host, Elizabeth McCready, wheelchair user, designer, marketing and communications professional, and accessibility specialist. My unofficial co-hosts are my cats Boo and Mabel. Every episode is guaranteed to have an unscheduled cameo by one or both of them. Boo is a gray fluffy boy who loves meeting people, snuggling on my shoulder, and getting into mischief. Mabel is a ginger tabby and white former feral kitten. She's a sweetie who loves pets, brushing, and chasing anything that moves, especially the red dot. In this first episode of 2026, I share my story of how my former home went from being the almost perfect, rent-controlled 15-minute city location to being unlivable, and the difference that moving into an accessible building has made. You might have noticed this monthly podcast hasn't had an episode for several months. It's for a very good reason. I've moved. I finally have elevators in my building, and I can even wheel my chair right into my place. This was the first time I've moved as a wheelchair user. Going through this moving journey to get more accessible home has increased my passion for accessible housing, public spaces, and transport. While most Curb Cuts and Conversations episodes are interviews and conversations with guests, this one is going to be a Liz's Storytime format episode. When I started Curb Cuts and Conversations in August 2025, I hadn't planned on taking a several months break right before recording the second full-length episode. I had potential guests lined up for the full-length episode. I had updated my merch graphic, including a hoodie for fall, featuring Mabel on the sleeve, who's chasing a raccoon up the CN Tower. I had turned my popular 2024 Web Accessibility Wednesdays series of posts on LinkedIn into a bonus podcast mini-series showing the wonderful people who work in digital accessibility in a 10 questions in 10-ish minutes format. However, life is what happens when you're making other plans. In September, I published the first Web Accessibility Wednesdays series episode on Wednesday the 10th, went to the Accessible Air Travel Forum on Thursday the 11th at Kite, downtown Toronto, and I had everything out of my former home and in a U-Haul by Monday the 16th. So why so quickly, especially after being there for 10 years? Well, the cute 1930s Art Deco walk-up building that had been my home for over 10 years had become unlivable. When I moved in on Canada Day in 2015, the building and the location were great. It had a backyard, so Kitten could safely go walkies on his leash. Huge trees out the windows, so my cats had cat TV with squirrels and birds to keep them occupied. It was peaceful and quiet, and I wasn't overlooked. There was only a small backyard parking lot next door, and the building was set so far back from Yonge Street that I didn't hear the traffic, and Google Maps thought I lived on the residential street behind me. There are even some original building features. I really love Art Deco. The original deep soaking bathtub, archways instead of doorways, 8-pane casement windows with wide windowsills for the cats. Also, being built well before November 15th, 2018, it was rent controlled, which became crucial as the rents were going up and up and up over the years in Toronto. I was even glad to have a walk-up building after experiencing the elevator rush hour living on the 20th floor of a high-rise up in North York. The location was also excellent. It was a true 15-minute city location with a walk score of 89, right on Yonge Street north of Eglinton, with great transit connections. There was a northbound Yonge bus stop right in front. The southbound one was a block away on the other side of Yonge Street. For those who don't know Toronto, Yonge is the major north-south street. Buses to 2 subway stations would run every 10 to 15 minutes with 30-minute night bus service. The Crosstown LRT was supposed to open 5 years after I moved in 2020, so I was expecting the transit to get even better. Within a 15-minute walk, there were 3 grocery stores. One was open 24 hours. Shoppers Drug Mart was also open 24/7, plus several small fruit and veg markets to get basic groceries were only 1 to 5 blocks away. There's an independent pharmacy, and my now former family doctor were right across the street. 2 of my favorite clothing stores, The Gap and Roots, plus a Starbucks, were just a block away. There's a pet shop for these guys and Lululemon. 2 public libraries, which were vital to my now former academic coaching practice. I'd meet students there. A community center with a weight room and a swimming pool were about 16 minutes away, 17, as well as the yoga studio I've been volunteering at. I could even access Toronto's ravine system for hiking, mountain biking, running, and cross-country skiing in less than 5 minutes. 3 of my cats went walkies on the leash there too. And yes, Boo was one of them, and he said hi to everyone, even jumped up on someone's lap. The only compromises were tiny closets, a smaller 1930s kitchen with large 1990s appliances, and the buzzer system only worked on a landline telephone. But I got an IKEA wardrobe that the cats could hang on top of to compensate for the closet space, a baker's rack for extra counter space and storage in the kitchen. As for the buzzer, my food allergies meant I never get food delivered. When my friends came over, they would just text me and I'd come down to let them in. There's original features, great location, and compromises were really easy to deal with. But life is what happens when you're making other plans. Things and circumstances changed, first gradually, then rapidly right before and during the pandemic. I got sick in April 2020 and again in December 21. I haven't left my home without a mobility aid since January of 2021. There were 3 half flights of stairs just to get in and out. It was a lot. I need to go down even more to the cellar to do laundry. When I moved in, I was told that the building management were updating the water and steam heating system. The system is a mini version of the district steam heating systems in New York City and U of T. All the buildings were connected for their heating and water to a central boiler. However, none of the units in the multi-building complex had shut-off valves. So if someone 7 buildings over needed their water shut off to repairs, let's say for their toilet, all the buildings were without water. Also, the parts for the system were hard to source, meaning that repairs took a long time. One December, we had no heat or hot water for over 4 days. 10 years later, they were still updating the system with multiple water shut-offs every single month. The last 8 days that I was there, the water was off twice and one of the 2 washers wasn't working. The stairs meant that I had no energy to fold and put my clothes away afterwards, and that's even if both the machines were working and available. When the machines weren't working, I ended up putting my laundry in my storage room next to the washing machines. Then there was the location. My formerly walkable 15-minute city location turned into a 1 to 2 hour location when I was using my walking poles or canes. I frequently found myself having to sit on the floor in shops and occasionally the street because there weren't enough benches. Access to accessible public toilets was extra challenging due to the pandemic restrictions. When quick errands turn into half-day or full-day expeditions, access to a toilet and running water is so important. And then I got my wheelchair in July 2024. It's given me my life back. I was able to start volunteering again at the City of Toronto cultural events and started volunteering at the Royal Ontario Museum. I actually used to work there in university, which was pretty cool. 10 days after getting my wheelchair, my constant brain fog cleared. I realized that trying to get a job in software development in 2024 in a field where 500,000 people have been laid off just wasn't the best idea. So I explored different related career paths that met my goals, got debt-free funding to do a project management certificate at U of T, as well as a business writing course. I got mid to high 90s and chose to continue the advanced marketing certificate, which is how I started this podcast, Cope Cuts and Conversations. But wheelchairs don't work well in 1930s walk-up buildings with narrow hallways and quirky layouts. My apartment hallways were too narrow and the whole layout was too quirky to use my wheelchair in my home, except for as something stationary to hold on to while walking to the bathroom at night. You know those long days where you're tired and looking forward to coming home, snuggling on the couch with your dog, your cats, your partner, or good book? For me, I get to my back door, remember the stairs, and say, crap. I'd have to take everything off my wheelchair, including bags of groceries, put them inside the doorway, take my wheelchair cushion off, and hang it on the brakes, fold the back down towards the seat, pick up my chair, and take her up the 3 half flights of stairs, open my front door, keeping the cats from getting into the hallway, stand to get her inside the door because it was too narrow to wheel through while sitting, then go back down 1.5 flights of stairs to get my groceries, and go back upstairs with them. I'd be too dizzy, nauseous, and in too much pain to put my groceries away, let alone cook a good dinner. If I went down to go out, then I realized it was raining or I'd forgotten something, I'd have to repeat the process. By the time I'd gone up and down 3 times, I was so dizzy and ill that I couldn't think or speak. And that lovely backyard I used to enjoy? It's not wheelchair accessible. I couldn't get to where picnic tables were on the far side of the lawn with my wheelchair, and dog owners weren't picking up their dog's poop. Gross. The location made me realize that 15-minute city concept and walkability don't include everyone. Construction, poor sidewalks and crossing conditions extend the distance needed to do errands, and not all public spaces are accessible. The closest market to get fruit, veg, and basic groceries was just a block away. It was brand new. Went up during the pandemic. Yay! But it had a very steep, skinny ramp covered with torn carpet. I tried going up it and couldn't. So I called Bylaw. The shop replaced the ramp, but it still had carpet on it, and it was too steep to get up. So then the closest place to get groceries was a 15-minute walk away for someone not using a wheelchair or mobility aid. I've been tracking my running and walking distance with my Peloton app for years. After getting my wheelchair, I noticed the distances for common errands were at least 1.5 times the distance as when I'd been walking. There are so many cracks, potholes, raised sidewalk sections that I have to constantly be weaving around them. The most ironic is the semi-frequent potholes at the bottom of curb cuts and the raised cracks at the top of them. I'm going to put a picture in here. Until I paid just over $1,000 for upgraded front caster wheels and ergonomic hand rims with super grippy strips, I had to go up the curb cut on my old block backwards. There was no other way for me to get home. Try doing that with groceries. I called Bylaw and filled out multiple online forums, and it never got fixed. The first day I got my wheelchair, I pitched out of her and injured my left hand because of one bad curb cut. I just went flying. That happened multiple times. Not only was my 15-minute city location now a 25 to 30-minute one, it was an injury-causing one. And then it snowed in February 2025, and the streets and sidewalks weren't shoveled or plowed. I was stuck at home for 2 weeks, missing my project management and business writing classes at U of T. I couldn't get to the end of my block to get to the bus stop I needed to go downtown. I thought about using the bus stop in front of my place to go north, to get on the subway eventually to go south, but the next subway station north isn't wheelchair accessible, and I didn't know the condition of the one further north. I knew I could end up getting stuck in a snowbank and not being able to cross the street to get the bus back down. So I got a friend to drop off a shovel, and I started shoveling. I was stuck at home anyway. I may as well go shovel. Over 2 days, I and the 50 random strangers that I invited to help shoveled 2.5 blocks so that myself and all the other wheelchair users, mobility aid users, and parents with children in strollers could get to both the northbound and southbound bus stops. Now my 15-minute city location had turned into a 2 to 3 day city location. I knew I needed to move. I couldn't put up with the stairs anymore with everything else that was going on. Needed to be closer to transit I could get to, but I thought I could make it another year. Was in a rent-controlled building. With my shoulder tearing in July, packing and moving was more feasible the following summer and fall. Besides, I needed that time to continue to declutter my 2 decades of other people's children's stuff after quitting teaching for 18 years in 2019. But again, life is what happens when you're making other plans. There was ongoing and increasing noise issues. The small walk-up and affordable 1930s buildings and their back parking lot next door were demolished during the pandemic, and a new mid-rise luxury condo tower was built. The barbecue area for it was right outside my windows. The building had a green roof over the skinny part of the parking garage that was right under my windows. It wasn't so green. The plants apparently needed to be trimmed with weed whackers every single week, followed by a team of workers using gas-powered leaf blowers. And for some reason, the workers periodically would cut large boulders with gas-powered stone cutters in the barbecue pit area. Then, right before starting this podcast, someone moved into that building that liked to sing off-key really loud for hours. The single-pane 1930s glass didn't keep any of the sound out. Sound would bounce back and forth between the tall concrete buildings and my 3-story brick one. For most of 2024, my upstairs neighbor would periodically play music really loud with thumping bass. Starting this past spring, it happened more frequently, sometimes twice a day for several hours. Nothing I did seemed to have any effect. Numerous times building security would come and tell them to turn it down. But the almost daily hours of noise continued. I installed a noise meter app on my phone and called 311 and shared the results. Even with the decibel levels being at the same level as a lawnmower, 311 weren't any help. Part of the issue with noise bylaw enforcement was building related. Because the buzzer only worked with a landline telephone and I have a cell phone, I couldn't let the bylaw officers in. I have hearing loss and tinnitus from getting sick in the pandemic. I have trouble hearing higher pitch noises and conversations with background noise. I'm not supposed to be around constant loud noise or wear my over-the-ear noise-canceling headphones. The headphones and noise-canceling ones make my tinnitus worse. Copyright music can't obviously be playing when I'm recording podcast episodes. If I can't filter it out, I'll get copyright strikes on YouTube and the other platforms. If you've watched the podcast before, You'll notice that part of each episode is filmed at a location not at my old apartment. That was because of noise. In addition to my hearing loss and tinnitus, I have sound-sensitive migraines. I've had increasing number of migraine days since getting sick in 2020. I've learned to manage them. My wheelchair has helped so much with it. Chronic noise exposure makes them worse. In fact, extensive research, including that discussed with Harvard Medical School, has shown that in addition to hearing loss and tinnitus, chronic noise exposure can lead to autonomic nervous system issues. My autonomic nervous system was damaged when I got sick, and it's why I'm a wheelchair user. I can't have it be interfered with. It also can cause mental health and cognition problems, memory impairment, and attention issues. The constant noise has started to reverse some of the health improvements that my wheelchair had given me. I was increasingly dizzy even when sitting, especially at home, and was fighting brain fog more often. I was randomly leaving things places and not being able to find them, or standing up from forgetting what I was doing. Though I still managed to get a 94 average at E002 in project management. You know those New York City-based sitcoms where someone's banging on the ceiling or yelling out the window? Be quiet! I became that person. The last couple of weeks it got so bad that I caved in and used my Sony headphones. I started looking at apartments in my area. As I said before, I wasn't planning on moving right away. Rent control in Toronto is so valuable, but I needed to see that I wouldn't be stuck there forever. The first apartment viewing was in a new high-rise rental building. It was so quiet. The rental agent was clearly spoken. I had no difficulty hearing her until she turned around. Then I had no clue what she was saying. It had never, ever happened before. That was a light bulb moment, like the exact moment that I knew I needed a wheelchair and not a service dog. Something had to change, and it couldn't wait until next year. That evening, I researched options. Being mid-month, there likely wasn't anything long-term until October 1st. So I found a pet-friendly motel with kitchens in Mississauga that I could stay at until I found a new home. I booked a U-Haul for the following Sunday, found out about the month's free storage with an intercity move, and booked the truck so that I could pick it up in Toronto and drop it off in Mississauga near the motel and get a free month of storage. As for finding a new apartment, I focused on sublets and private landlords that were more likely to have short application periods. It was challenging, and it's also the first time I've looked for a new home as a wheelchair user. I had multiple landlords tell me, "Oh, this isn't suitable for you," before even asking what I needed for accessibility or realizing that I was ambulatory and I can take some steps. One even had the gall to demand, not ask, demand to speak to my social worker because I'm a wheelchair user and therefore I must have a social worker looking after me. On the day before I picked up the U-Haul truck, I found my new home. It's in a 1970s 30-story high-rise building with 4 elevators, a laundry room with an automatic door, a corner shop in the building. There's also a swimming pool I can access. Because of my shoulder injuries, I can't use pool ladders. I need a hoist, a ramp, or large steps to enter and exit a pool. My building's pool has large stairs going in and out, so I'm good. There's also tennis courts, which means I have a place to play if I decide to try out wheelchair tennis. Maybe. I don't know. My shoulder's injured. We'll see. The block of wide green space around the building is wheelchair accessible because there's multiple concrete paths. I've been able to meet lots of my new neighbors when they're sitting on benches and letting their dogs play. And the dog owners also pick up the dog's poop and put it in one of the mini garbage cans, so I'm not having to weave around it. The entrance to my apartment is wide enough for me to wheel in and turn my wheelchair around. It's wonderful. There's an 8.5-foot long closet in the entranceway that has shelves at wheelchair height where I can put my keys, wheelchair gloves, and water bottle holder. I even get my mail delivered to my front apartment door. Transit is great too. Even with the early icky winter and people still not shoveling, the closest north and southbound bus stops are only half a block away, with all but half a meter of that being shoveled by the property management of my building. And my building is quiet, even though it's only a block away from multiple high-rise construction sites, so much closer to Yonge and Eglinton. And there's construction on site upgrading the building's cladding and parking garages. But the only thing I ever hear is a huge number of children playing in the park right outside my building after school. Even then, it's likely quieter enough that I can filter it out. The icing on the cake is that my decade of renter beige is over. I couldn't put anything on my walls at my old place because of the textured 1930s plaster. Here it's solid, soundproof, smooth reinforced concrete. I've splashed out and done peel and stick wallpaper behind the couch and backsplash tile in the kitchen. Yay, I have a studio background. Able to put lots of 3M command hooks at wheelchair accessible height, but it's taken a long time to unpack, fit a 1-bedroom with storage room into a studio apartment and get my new place set up. Moving and unpacking is challenging for anyone, but unpacking boxes that other people packed for me and having to sit down frequently while doing so takes ages. It's still a work in progress. But now I'm at the stage where I can set up my recording equipment and ring in 2026 by writing and recording this episode of Curb Cuts and Conversations. So what's in the works for 2026? We'll be exploring accessibility in housing, transportation, and the built environment and public spaces. Accessibility isn't just focused on wheelchair users or those of us with physical disabilities. Cognitive accessibility is just as important as physical disability. The first 2 guests for the main episodes of 2026 are Rebecca Tarrant and Ron Buehling. Rebecca Tarrant is the founder and executive director of Autistic Youth International, the U.S. coordinator and global ambassador of the Neurodiversity Foundation, a public speaker, and a mom to an autistic son with ADHD. She was also recently diagnosed with autism herself, so speaks from lived experience. She's also very kind and patient. She was the next guest I planned on having in the fall, and then I moved and had no idea it would take me over 3 months to sort things out. Rebecca and I will be discussing what makes public spaces and transportation accessible and inaccessible for neurodiverse people. Ron Buehling is a University of Toronto distinguished professor in the geographies of disability and ableism. I met him and his teenage daughter at the Accessible Air Travel Forum at KITE on September 11th. His daughter's a wheelchair user. This has focused Ron's research on the intersection of disability, cities, and ableism. I've been following his research for about a year before I met him, as it aligns with my education in geography and urban planning, as well as my lived experience and professional interests in accessibility. For this episode, we'll be discussing his work on 15-minute cities, walkability, and last millimeter problems. Who is a 15-minute city and walk score for? And looking at the history of disability in urban transportation to illustrate how cities can become impassable in the presence of small-scale, big-impact limitations and failings in infrastructure and services, like that inaccessible ramp at the closest place to get groceries at my old home. So what about Web Accessibility Wednesdays? Am I going to be continuing it? Yes, I am. I really enjoyed recording and editing the first Web Accessibility Wednesdays episode. It's been great being able to highlight the work of the wonderful people in my network of accessibility professionals, especially those I knew through the Accessibility Book Club, the Web Accessibility Study Group, and A11YTO. The digital world intersects with the physical in many ways. So in addition to guests from my existing network, I'm looking for professionals that are involved in web and digital accessibility projects that intersect with the physical one. For example, transit apps and websites for physical locations like restaurants, those aimed at the disability community. There's a few people who are on my dream list for both the main Curb Cuts and Conversations episodes and Web Accessibility Wednesdays. So what about the unofficial Curb Cuts and Conversations co-host, my cat Boo? You saw that Mabel's been filling in. She really likes where the sofa is in the new place. Don't worry, Boo is still here. He's been a very sick boy over Christmas, but he's getting better. He's napping under the couch right now. In 2023, he shoved a mini Christmas tree from the dollar store up his nose. Twice. He did it twice. And being Boo, he did the impossible. He got a tiny piece of the metal artificial snow stuck up through into his sinus cavity. So it's been 2 years of vet appointments, reoccurring abscesses, and medication. But we have a new vet, Dr. Rebecca at Juno Vet. She's wonderful. And it's accessible in my wheelchair without having to book and pay for a wheelchair-accessible Uber van. Boo has sat in my lap in his new space bubble carrier, and we went lap walkies using my new smart drive to get there. This is the longest time that Boo's been on antibiotics and the first time a vet's given him his anti-inflammatory medication on a daily basis and not alternating days. And he was doing so well. Then I woke up on Christmas Eve to his right side of his face incredibly swollen, and he was having a massive nosebleed. I was able to call the vet. They were open at 8 a.m. on Christmas Eve. And while I was waiting for his vet to call back, and I was on the app chatting with the vet tech, Boo sneezed up what the vet and I think was part of the Christmas tree. Merry Christmas, Mom, here's your present. He's been feeling really ill and needing to be syringe fed, but he's on the mend, and he's been moving around and staggering around the last few days. So he's getting there. As you saw at the beginning of the episode, Mabel might be stepping in for him, or maybe becoming another co-host, because she's liking the back of the couch in our new apartment. She made a quick cameo in this week's Accessibility Book Club event with Megan Thomas. Merch shop and graphic design updates for 2026. Both Mabel and Boo are in the designs for show merch in the shop at shop www.curbcuts.fm. I revamped the Cities Are for Everyone Queens Quay design on my business cards after going to the Accessible Air Travel Forum at Kite in September. The new design includes an airplane, which is likely taking off from Billy Bishop Airport, and a pink traffic helicopter. I also put Boo on the streetcar making friends with a raccoon, because he would. This hoodie that I'm wearing is the original design. The new ones have the CN Tower on the sleeve with Mabel at the bottom and the raccoon that she's chased up sitting on the restaurant when the crosstown opens. I'll also do a special design for that. I'll post the new designs on my Instagram and occasional posts on LinkedIn. And that's a wrap for the second episode of Curb Cuts and Conversations. That's where I've been, and that's what's up for 2026. Thank you for watching and/or listening. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and most importantly, have a really awesome day.